So we are going to start in terms of the next components. We discussed till this in terms of the definitions, what we discussed about the DPDPA as well as GDPR, right? So we will continue in terms of the word processing, right? So I would have typically given you some important words when part of my previous interaction, that processing is a very broad word, right? If we have to include any scope of a law, it always relates or ties back to the word processing, right? So one important element as a DPO you should always be aware of is that just don't think about the traditional model of processing, right? So when we collect the data, we put it we collect it in a web form, or you collect it from an API, or you collect it in a paper form, convert it, and then you store it in a database, then you process it. So this is all traditional processing, but there are a lot of untraditional, or there are unique ways data comes into our organization as well, right? So that is somewhere you need to be aware of, that also constitutes processing activity, right? So I'll give you simple use case, right? So if you are having a visitor a logbook, right? So visitor logbook, which you keep it in your entrance, typically people say it's in paper records, so it's not part of DPDPA. But unfortunately, some or the other day you scan it to do some sort of operations on top of it, to see, to use the data for some reason, or you're trying to evaluate something, whatever it could be, then it falls under the DPDP Act, right? So this amounts to processing, right? And a lot of cookies related data also goes under the brushes under the carpet, because people traditionally don't understand to the different type of trackers they enable, right? So people enable trackers to see a person has opened the email or not, right? So that also you would have heard about pixels, right? You would have heard about trackers. These are enabled to basically to see whether a person has opened an email, read the email, right? So there are lot of different and types of processing which we may not traditionally look at, but they still fall under the uh, 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 broader definition of processing, right? So what is important that we need to understand between GDPR and DPDP Act, they both have a similar inference, which is like data could be either partially or fully processed under fully automation. So there is a difference between being digital and being using a automated decision making. There is a difference. People often confuse that in GDPR terminology, right? So let me give you a important inference here. Completely automated decision making, right, means you use a system to use a end-to-end decision. Like the system collects the data, or the data is fed into the system, and the system gives you an output which is directly has an impact on the individuals. It could be a credit card, or it could be a loan, or it could be a simple evaluation of a person for any reason, right? I apply for a form, I apply anything for any positions, right? A lot of companies have started using in HRMS as well to do initial evaluation of the CVs or resumes. It's finding a lot of quick adoption, right? But Amazon had a backfiring like 5 6 years before itself. They actually used automated decision making to filter the candidates, but their algorithm had a critical flaw, which was actually favoring men over women in terms of certain keywords, right? So these kind of biases had such a big negative impact, and Amazon has to pull it off in terms of their application, right? Now what is the misunderstanding is digital versus automated decision making is two different things. If you're using a system, that's your end-to-end automated decision making. Whereas when we use the word here automated operation, it's more of digital. Either your operation is semi-digital or digital, it's coming under the scope of your both DPDP Act as well as GDPR. The only difference that you can see in the DPDP Act is that the personal data that is completely in paper form, which is not going to be digitized or scanned later, will not be included in the scope of law. Whereas The processing where paper asset can come under GDPR hammer is that if it is going to be part of a filing system, then this is going to be included, right? So I'll give you simple examples where processing, which is again usually out of box, where people think that when I get access to just view the data, does it also fall under the uh, scope of processing? So there are some few questions, Lalit. I think I'll answer your question, Lalit. Just remind me at the end. Okay. So it is yes. For example, you are having your salary information, your pay slip is there in your screen. Okay. You wanted to look at your pay slip, and suddenly a person comes and just stands and stares at your screen. Unfortunately, is able to see your salary. What do you think about it? Is it a processing? So these are all related to processing, because people often think traditionally it is like moving to in a system, or moving in a digital format in an application or server, whatever, that's all the traditional thinking. But processing can also come in the unconventional forms, right? So this information can be utilized by the same person to do something, because it's there in that it's there with the person, he is aware of it, correct? So that also amounts to disclosure. Disclosure is one of the important aspect of your processing, right? So why I'm insisting on this is that processing is a very broad terminology, right? If we have to be mindful of the different ways, right? Where what amounts to processing and what amounts not, because that is where your material scope of GDPR will come into picture. How establish decision making as a process? How establish decision making as a process? So how to establish, is it a process or not? So any operation that is done on the personal data, right? So that amounts to processing. So, in my view, it's very difficult to say that's not a processing if you have not done anything. That I gave you some remote examples, but most of the activities which are mentioned there, right, like structuring the data, retrieval, use, alignment, indexing, sharing, disclosure, dissemination, using it to modify, restrict, erasure, archival, everything that you do on the data amounts to processing. All right.